Hi everyone, Terry Newsom from Behind Enemy Lines. So we want to do a little recap of the clown show in Illinois earlier this week. It was national news. We had the hearings in front of the election board with recommendations from the front of the Illinois election board with recommendations from the hearing officers first for the Trump case as well as the Biden case. As you know, we filed a petition to keep Biden off the Illinois ballot for offering comfort and aid to our enemies. I think everybody knows that with respect to the open borders, the drug cartels, the Chinese, Afghanistan, Taliban. So that I think is pretty solid evidence. And with respect to Trump, just like in Colorado, Illinois, Maine, and other states, radical leftists are trying to claim that Trump was guilty of an insurrection. And that's under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, just like our claim is. Except the only difference is Trump has never been charged or convicted of insurrection. Neither has Biden, but we have more real evidence supporting the fact that what Biden is doing is driven by something else more so than the American people, and he is providing comfort and aid to our enemies like the Taliban, drug cartels, Chinese, the fentanyl, forcing Texas to open their borders, pretty much saying they got to open their borders. So Biden's attorney is a guy named Matthew Pierce, radical leftist scumbag. Little Weasel was in there. And his allegations about Trump's violation, I guess, of Section 3 of Amendment 14, an insurrection clause, he said that Trump was found guilty based off the evidence he provided, which was from the J6 bipartisan committee. He says bipartisan, right? The J6 committee, there was the two scumbag clowns, Cheney and Kinzinger, that were on that. And we know that was a clown show, right? They did that for their own self-preservation. They were in trouble. They knew they were in trouble, and they're turncoats. They're turncoats on the country. They're turncoats on their party, and they're just scumbags in general. They're hypocrites. So that was not a bipartisan decision. Matthew Pierce said that Donald Trump prevented a peaceful transition of the government. He prevented a peaceful transition. He's responsible for insurrection and the seize of the Capitol. This is Donald Trump. So we know Nancy Pelosi refused to let the National Guard. We know everything's coming out now. That's all bullshit, right? I was at January 6th. I was proud to be there. I didn't incite a riot. I didn't go in. I didn't hit anybody. I didn't even yell, right? It's all bullshit. Some people did fight. They deserve to get in trouble. They don't deserve, nobody deserves the bullshit time that has been given to them by this criminal Marxist administration of Biden and that scumbag Christopher Wray. So I'm sorry, I get all worked up here. It's a joke, right? So Trump was allowed, they voted to keep Trump on the ballot. And the reason being is that they said they figured they didn't have the jurisdiction to, or the time, right, to evaluate the Constitution under Amendment 14, Section 3. So with that said, they weren't doing them any favors. And we're supposed to have a nonpartisan election board. They're appointed by B.J. Pritzker, our governor. So you know that's bullshit from the get-go, right? So if I find it kind of funny that there was a judge named Clark Erickson, Republican, supposedly retired judge. And this scumbag made a recommendation to the board. And in his recommendation, he said he doesn't feel that they should take Trump off the ballot, which is fine, right? And I think we agree. I think the Supreme Court should make this decision, even with respect to ours. But we had somebody in the country had to throw back some of the same crap that they're doing to our side, right? And hopefully the Supreme Court will make the right decision. But this scumbag went out of his way, Clark Erickson. What he said was, and he goes, Trump should remain on the ballot. But if this thing goes forward, I believe he was responsible for an insurrection. I believe he's guilty of an insurrection. So there was no need to include that in there, right? There was no recommendation. Did you think he was guilty of an insurrection or not? There's no evidence of an insurrection. There was no charge of an insurrection. There was no conviction of an insurrection. But Clark Erickson, Republican, thought that Trump was guilty of insurrection. So everybody voted on the election board. And the last person to vote of this bipartisan board, which is bullshit, is another woman named Catherine McCrory. Catherine McCrory, who claims to be a Republican. And then when she put forth her vote, she said, yes, I agree with the others, and Trump should remain on the ballot. But I'm a Republican, and I believe as a Republican that Donald Trump was responsible for the insurrection. He was responsible for the insurrection. He instigated, manipulated, aided, and abetted the insurrection on January 6th. It's a lie. We all know it's a lie. I wanted to say something. I was at January 6th. It wasn't my hearing. I was sitting in the back. I had to wait until we went up front for the Biden one. So they're keeping Trump on the ballot, which is great. So these two Republican scumbags, Catherine McCrory and Clark Erickson, made their comments about Trump being guilty of an insurrection for CNN. All the fake news, as Mr. Trump would say, all those scumbags were in the back filming it, right? And that's why they said it. It was totally irrelevant to anything that was being heard upon that day. But they did that, and everyone knows that they did that for the camera. So here comes forth us with our Biden claim. So that Joe Biden was guilty of providing comfort and aid. And Joe Biden's attorney said that our petition should be dismissed. It should be dismissed because our petition was hearsay, right? Everyone knows what's going on at the border. Our petition was fake. Our petition was politically motivated, right? So keep in mind, I had to sit here and listen to this crap just after hearing what they did to Mr. Trump, right? So the hearing officer who made his recommendation to the election board before they all voted, he basically said, oh yeah, I agree with Biden's attorney that this is hearsay, this is fake, this is politically motivated. When on the other hand, with Trump's hearing, they let them use the J6 hearing, that politically motivated, bias, full of lies hearing in the J6 committee, and they let them use that with no injection of, that's bullshit, that's politically motivated, that's bias. But with respect to us and the border, we know that the Supreme Court gave Biden the opportunity to keep remain in Mexico in play. They gave it to him. That's not politically biased. That's not hearsay. That's documented, right? What did Biden do? He didn't listen. He didn't listen to him. So that's Joe Biden. Why didn't he listen to him, right? We also know that Joe Biden went to the Supreme Court to force Governor Abbott and force the people of Texas to open their doors at the border. He forced them, right, to cut down the razor wire. Why was Biden doing that? Was that for the American people? Was it for the people of Texas? Or was it because he's providing comfort and aid to our enemies? Or he had something hanging over his head from China, right? The drug cartels. All these different countries that we know, we've got all these terrorists coming in, flooding in our country. He knows that. He knows it's collapsing our country. But he's doing it for a reason. He's not doing it for us. And you got these scumbags from Illinois, and when you hear these videos, you're going to hear both. You're going to hear first the Trump one. You're going to hear the hypocrisy, the bullshit that these liberal scumbags incorporate into the petition why Trump should be thrown off. You're going to hear Catherine McCrory and Clark Erickson, supposed to be Republicans. You know what? I hope the Illinois GOP kicks these scumbags out, but you know what? The Illinois GOP leadership is full of pussies. Apologize for the bad words, but it's a fact. They don't fight. These people should be thrown out for. There was no reason for them, even if they really felt that, to say that about President Trump. So you will hear my comments at the end, basically restating what I just said to you. And at the end of my statement, I did have to make a comment, even though it wasn't relevant to my hearing, saying that there was no insurrection. It was fake. There were no weapons. Donald Trump didn't cause anyone to go. I wanted to blurt out and say, listen, I was there. None of you scumbags were there. You're lying. Nobody went to the Capitol to overthrow the government. You know, the United States of America is the most powerful country in the world. Who the hell is going to overthrow the United States government with a flagpole and a camera? There were people that did some bad things that day, right? That shouldn't have. With that said, all the rest is bullshit and it's lies. It's lies. The only people that were trying to overthrow an election is Nancy Pelosi, Matthew Pierce, and everybody who thinks there was an insurrection. Those are the people. Those are the criminals. Those are the ones that really tried to interfere with the election. Even to this day, if you're still saying there was an insurrection, you're a liar. So hopefully you could listen to this, make your own assumptions or opinions based on what you hear, and let these individuals do the talking for you and hear if you believe there's hypocrisy or not based on how Trump's petition and Biden's petition were treated by the Illinois Board of Elections that were appointed by B.J. Prickster. Have a good day.
And it should be rejected. There is no, quote unquote, knowing violation exception to the mandatory requirements of the Illinois Election Code of certification by each candidate that they meet the qualifications for the office they seek. If they do not meet those qualifications, they may not be on the ballot, regardless of the good intent. We heard some cases this morning about residency, about name change, and certainly in the case of the residency case, it is quite possible that the judicial candidate in that case thought that by renting an apartment in, I think it was Franklin County, don't hold me to that, but in Franklin County, that he or she was in compliance with the law. Well, you found he or she was not. I apologize, I don't remember the gender of the judicial candidate. And you didn't find that based on what the candidate thought was legal compliance, but rather on legal compliance. I want to add parenthetically that while it would not help Donald Trump here in any event, for the evidence clearly establishes that the certification that he made at the time he made it was false, he was certainly well aware that his conduct in seeking to prevent the certification of the results of the presidential election was unlawful, was illegal. He had been told so repeatedly by his own lawyers, by the Attorney General of the United States, by other high-level officials in the United States Department of Justice, and by his own campaign staff, as well as the Vice President of the United States. I submit to you that's a fairly fulsome record upon which to presume he knew that trying to prevent the peaceful transfer of power was illegal. He was well aware, undisputed, of the invasion and seizure of the Capitol, and indeed has acknowledged that it was an insurrection under the meaning of the third section of the 14th Amendment of our Constitution. That it was an insurrection was found overwhelmingly by both houses of the United States Congress in the most significant bipartisan vote in years, and was admitted by counsel for Mr. Trump on the floor of the House during his impeachment proceedings. So I think you could find knowing violation of the law quite easily on this record, but the truth is there is no such scienter requirement in the Illinois Election Code. This board is what is inartfully called by lawyers a creature of statute, and only has those powers that you are given by statute and required to undertake under the constitutions of the state of Illinois and the United States. I pause and note every governmental entity must comply with those two constitutions, regardless of what their statutory mandate is. I'm thinking about that. There's no dispute and no unclarity. What you may not do is graft new elements, new requirements onto the clear language of the Illinois election code.
I'd like to make a statement before I rule on this. I want it to be clear that this Republican believes that there was an insurrection on January 6th. There's no doubt in my mind that he manipulated, instigated, aided, and abetted an insurrection on January 6th. However, having said that, is not my place to rule on that today. So I will say yes to the motion as far as not having jurisdiction to rule on that fact today.
From addressing issues involving constitutional analysis. If the motion to dismiss is granted for lack of jurisdiction, the hearing officer implies but does not state that the objection should be overruled and candidate Donald J. Trump's name should not be
I'd
placed.
like to make a statement.
Excuse me, I should be placed.
So
on the ballot
with
for
all of those
the United
caveats,
States. However, the hearing officer recommends that if the board declines to grant, the candidate filed a motion to dismiss, which was fully briefed, and a hearing proves by a preponderance of the evidence that candidate in fact engaged in insurrection within the meaning of Section 3, specifically referencing a social media post regarding former Vice President Pence during the breach of the Capitol. As a result, should the board decide it has jurisdiction to decide the Section 3 question, and it should deny the motion to dismiss, the hearing officer recommends that candidate Donald J. Trump's name should not be placed on the ballot for President of the United States. Both sides filed exceptions to the recommendation. The candidate filed a motion to dismiss, which was fully briefed, and a hearing was held, at which the objectors requested that the hearing officer take, quote, judicial notice of certain records. The hearing officer's recommendation finds that the board does not have jurisdiction to determine the issue of qualification requirements of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, relying on the Illinois Supreme Court cases of Delgado versus Board of Election Commissioners and Goodman versus Ward, which are cited on your summary sheets and which we've discussed at length today. Here, I fully agree with the hearing officer's next recommendation, which is to grant the motion to dismiss because the petition fails to factually and legally state a viable basis for an objection, as the allegations made involve candidates' official immigration and foreign policies, which do not equate to personally providing aid or comfort to enemies of the United States, and nomination papers cannot be invalidated over policy disagreements. I note that I believe the board has jurisdiction to grant the motion to dismiss for this reason, because under Section 10-10 of the Election Code, this board possesses both jurisdiction as well as a duty to pass upon objections to nomination papers filed to candidates. And this objection is so inadequate, both legally and factually, it cannot be said to adequately plead a cause of action for disqualification under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. So I do not believe the jurisdictional issue needs to be reached in this matter. However, I do not recommend dismissing based upon the issue of whether Section 3 of the 14th Amendment applies to the office of president, as the hearing officer recommends, as it's unnecessary to reach this issue, given the recommendation to dismiss based on the legal and factual deficiency of the pleading. And it's also a controversial issue that the board does not need to tread into, in my opinion. The objectors filed exceptions to the recommendation, arguing the hearing officer should have taken judicial notice of public documents they wish to offer as evidence and made other evidentiary ruling arguments that should have been made in their favor. They also disagree that this is a policy dispute. So here the hearing officer recommends, and I agree to the extent previously stated, that the motion to dismiss should be granted. Candidate has submitted valid nomination papers. The objection should be overruled, and candidate's name, Joseph R. Biden Jr., should be certified for the March general primary ballot as a Democratic Party candidate for the office of President of the United States.
Hi, Terry Newsom, pro se as well. And as the prior counsel on the Trump case made a statement that, he heard other cases, mentioned earlier today before he spoke, as well did I when he spoke. And I find it interesting that, we're being alleged that our information is not factual, hearsay, it's political, partisan, motivated, while at the same time we had to listen that Trump should be off the ballot for insurrection that was falsely claimed by the highly partisan J6 committee. It's identical as to what we're, is being alleged here, except the difference is with respect to our claims, we know that Biden ignored the Supreme Court remain in Mexico. He ignored that. That's not partisan. He ignored that himself. We also know that Biden, this is not hearsay, Biden left $8 billion in military equipment and weapons in Afghanistan in the hands of the Taliban. And now we know that those weapons are being used against our men and women in Iraq, including one of my relatives that are out there. So that's not hearsay. It's not partisan. That's a fact. We also know that Joe Biden went to the Supreme Court to try to force Texas to keep them from protecting their own borders from invasions of illegals, drug smugglers, Chinese that he knows are coming in, including over 300 terrorists that are entering our country and being infiltrated, especially into Chicago. I think we all know that. We're all experiencing it. None of that is hearsay. It's all factual. So I guess that, that's all I have to say, because as respect to the insurrection, there was no insurrection. That's false. There was no weapons there. Nobody went to overthrow the government. No one tried to listen to Trump. And if that's going to be a valid response from the other council, then that's highly partisan. These things that I mentioned are not highly partisan.